My name is Hannah Carter. I'm 36 years old, and by the time most women my age were building careers, falling in love, or learning how to live for themselves, I had already spent half my life making sure my little brother never felt how hard the world could be. I didn't come to his wedding expecting applause. I didn't need gratitude wrapped in gold paper and pretty speeches. I came because I had earned my seat in that room the hard way. I came as the woman who worked double shifts, skipped college, pawned her jewelry, and lied about being fine, so a scared little boy could grow into a man with a future. So when I stepped into that elegant reception hall, wearing the best dress I could afford and carrying more pride than anyone there could possibly understand, I truly believed I was coming to witness one of the happiest moments of my life. Then I found my seat. The place card was ivory, hand-lettered and expensive enough to look delicate. It sat in front of a crystal glass and polished silverware like it belonged there. I picked it up with a smile already forming on my face. Then I read it. Poor, uneducated sister, my brother's freeloader. For one full second, the room disappeared. Then the laughter started. Not shocked laughter, not nervous laughter. Comfortable laughter. The kind of laughter people share when they believe they're safe being cruel. My fingers went cold around the card. My throat burned. I wanted to put it down, straighten my back, and leave with whatever dignity I had left. But before I could take a step, my brother caught my wrist, stood up so fast his chair scraped across the floor, and said, in a voice that silenced half the room, "Whoever thought humiliating my sister today was funny is about to learn how expensive disrespect can be. Before I tell you what happened next, and why the next morning changed everything, tell me, what time is it where you are, and where are you watching from? I want to know how far this story has reached before I take you any further." The laughter died so abruptly it felt like the entire room had been slapped. My brother was still holding my hand, and for the first time since I had entered that ballroom, I wasn't the embarrassed poor relative standing under rich people's judgment. I was the reason the groom had stopped his own wedding reception cold. Heads turned, forks hovered over plates. The string quartet, tucked in the corner like decoration, had quietly gone still. And across the room, the bride's father slowly rose from his chair with the offended calm of a man who had spent his entire life believing money made him untouchable. That was when I first heard his name spoken aloud by someone at the next table. Mark Whitmore. He didn't rush. Men like him never do. He adjusted the cuff of his jacket, smoothed the front of it, then looked at me the way people look at a stain they think someone else should remove. "Jake," he said, almost amused. "Sit down before you embarrass yourself even more." So that was the second name the room gave me that night. Jake. My little brother. The boy I had raised. The groom whose face had gone hard in a way I had only seen twice in my life. Once when our landlord tried to throw us out in the rain, and once when a teacher mocked my thrift store shoes in front of him when he was 12. "No," Jake said. "You're going to explain why my sister's seat card says freeloader." A few people shifted uncomfortably, but Mark didn't. He even smiled, though there was no warmth in it. "Oh, don't be dramatic. It was a joke. Surely she's used to surviving worse than a joke." That line got a few ugly chuckles from people who had recovered just enough courage to be cruel again. My stomach clenched, but I kept my chin up. I wasn't going to cry for them. Not one tear. A woman in pale silk standing near the sweetheart table whispered, "This is exactly why class matters." I recognized her as the bride's mother before anyone said her name. Patricia, pearls at her throat, ice in her eyes. Jake took one step forward. "Say another word about my sister," he said quietly, "and I promise you this day stops being about your daughter's wedding and starts being about what kind of man you really are." That finally put a crack in the room. Not because everyone suddenly found their conscience, but because they sensed risk. Rich people can tolerate cruelty. What they fear is exposure. Mark's expression sharpened. "Young man, everything you have now exists because my daughter chose you, because my family opened doors for you. That woman," he pointed at me without even pretending respect, "didn't build you. She held on to you." I felt Jake's fingers tighten around mine. Then he said, louder this time, My sister fed me before she fed herself. She worked nights so I could finish school. She sold the only necklace our mother left her so I could buy textbooks. If you think that makes her a freeloader, then your definition of value is rotten. The silence that followed was different, heavier, more dangerous. Mark glanced toward the back of the room and I followed his eyes just in time to see him lift his phone. Not to call security. Not yet. He was calmer than that. Smarter than that. He murmured to someone on the other end, his gaze never leaving Jake. "I want the prenup attorney on standby," he said, "and put a hold on the transfer we discussed. Immediately." Jake heard him. I heard him. And in that instant, the shape of the real threat became clear. This wasn't about one insulting card anymore. This was a man announcing that because his pride had been challenged, he was willing to use his money to punish the future. Jake looked at him without blinking. "Thank you," he said. Mark frowned. "For what?" Jake's voice dropped into something almost frighteningly steady. "For proving who you are in front of everyone. If a wealthy man could erase your tomorrow with one phone call, what would you do? Walk away and save yourself? Or stay and make him regret ever trying?" The bride had been silent until then. Beautiful, frozen and pale under the expensive reception lights, she had looked like someone standing between two worlds and trusting neither one not to collapse. When she finally moved, it wasn't toward her father. It was toward Jake. "Stop," she whispered, but the word cracked in the middle as though it had split under the pressure of all the things she had never said out loud. That was when I learned her name not from gossip, but from Jake's mouth. "Emily," he said softly, still staring at her father. "You need to decide whether this is a wedding or a warning." The room seemed to inhale. Emily Whitmore was not what I had expected when I first met her months earlier. She had the polish of wealth, yes, but not its worst habits. I had seen uncertainty in her from the beginning, the kind that comes from loving someone your family approves of on paper but not in truth. She loved Jake's potential. Her father loved the idea of owning part of it. And in that ballroom, with the place card still in my hand like evidence, Emily looked at me as if she suddenly understood that marrying the man she loved meant finally facing the kind of family she had been born into. Mark's voice sharpened. "Emily, come here." She didn't move. Patricia stepped in, smiling that brittle society smile meant to disguise panic. "Sweetheart, your father is trying to contain an ugly scene. Don't make this harder." Emily swallowed. Then she looked at me again, and what crossed her face was not pity. It was shame. Deep, unmistakable shame. "Did you know?" I asked her, because I needed the truth more than I needed comfort. Her eyes filled immediately. "No," she said. "I swear to you, I didn't know." That should have been enough to soften me. But humiliation has a long echo, and I had spent too many years surviving by distrusting easy tears. Before I could answer, Jake spoke. "Then prove it." Emily flinched like he had struck her. Mark took a step forward. "That's enough. She owes none of you a test." Jake finally let go of my hand and squared himself to the room. "No," he said. "Actually, everyone in here owes my sister an answer. Because all of you laughed before you knew whether she'd survive it." And then the scene shifted in my mind with the strange clarity trauma sometimes gives you. I saw my brother at 8, sitting at our chipped kitchen table, fighting a fever while I pressed cool towels to his forehead before heading to my night shift. I saw him at 14, too proud to admit he needed money for a school trip, pretending he didn't care while I picked up an extra weekend cleaning office bathrooms. I saw him at 17, standing in our apartment doorway, with a scholarship letter in one hand and tears in his eyes, because he knew exactly what it had cost me to get him there. Emily's voice broke through my thoughts. "I know what she did for you," she said. Mark laughed once, cruel and dismissive. "You know the sentimental version." Emily turned to him so fast even he looked startled. "No," she said, and this time there was steel in her voice. "I know the real version. Jake told me how she raised him, how she became more parent than sister, how she buried her own future to protect his. And you put Freeloader on her place card?" Patricia tried to intervene. "Emily, not now." "When then?" Emily shot back. "After we cut the cake?" After we toast the people who humiliated the woman who kept your future son-in-law alive? Some guests looked away. Others watched more closely, sensing the balance of power shift for the first time. Mark's face hardened in a way I realized had probably terrified boardrooms for 30 years. "Be careful," he told his daughter. "You are emotional right now." Emily gave a short, disbelieving laugh. "No, Dad, I'm awake." That landed. You could feel it. Not because it was loud, but because it pierced his image of himself. Men like Mark expect defiance from outsiders. They never expect it from the daughter they raised to obey beautifully. Jake looked at Emily with pain, hope, and disbelief, all at once. "Did you know your father planned to control our accounts after the wedding?" Emily's head snapped toward Mark. He didn't answer. That was answer enough. "Dad?" she said again, quieter this time. Mark finally spoke, but the confidence had thinned. "It was a legal precaution." Emily stared at him as if some private illusion had just died. "You were going to start our marriage with surveillance and punishment?" Mark's jaw tightened. "I was going to protect you." "From what?" she demanded. "Love? Loyalty? A man who defends his sister?" That question rolled through the room like a thrown blade. I could feel the crowd changing, not morally, not all at once, but strategically. People begin to pull back from cruelty the moment it stops looking powerful. I stepped forward then, because for all Jake's courage and Emily's shock, this was still my humiliation, and I would not vanish inside it. "Mr. Whitmore," I said, "I don't need your approval. I never came here asking for your money, your status, or your blessing. I came because my brother asked me to stand beside him on the most important day of his life. And if the only way your family knows how to welcome me is with a public insult, then whatever empire you built clearly failed where it mattered most." Mark looked at me with open contempt. "You think a speech makes you equal?" "No," I said. "I think character does." Emily's eyes filled, but she didn't look away. Jake reached for her hand this time, and after one terrible second of hesitation, she let him take it. That was the moment the wedding stopped being a performance and became a battle line. Mark did not shout immediately. That would have made him look emotional, and he was too practiced for that. Instead, he smiled the way a predator smiles when it has decided patience will hurt more than force. "Very moving," he said. "Truly. The hard-working sister, the loyal brother, the awakened bride. If this were a movie, I suppose the audience would clap." No one did. He turned to Jake. "But this is not a movie. This is the real world, and in the real world, people like me determine whether people like you rise or remain what they were born into." Jake didn't flinch. "I'd rather stay honest at the bottom than rotten at the top." Mark nodded slowly, almost impressed. "And there it is. Pride dressed up as virtue. You think suffering makes you noble. It doesn't. It just makes you resentful." I had heard versions of that sentence my whole life from people who had never skipped meals, never hidden overdue bills, never smiled through exhaustion so a younger sibling wouldn't panic. They always wanted poverty to be either romantic or shameful, never dignified. Jake stepped toward him again, but I touched his arm. He stopped. I knew that look in Mark's eyes now. He had moved past insult. He was calculating punishment. And I was right. He lifted his phone once more, this time making no effort to hide it. "Charles," he said when the call connected, "pull the junior analyst offer from Carter. Effective immediately, and inform Hensley Development that if they move forward with him after tonight, our investment discussion is over." Emily gasped. "Dad, what are you doing?" He covered the phone for only a second. "Teaching him scale." Then he returned to the call. "Also, cancel the foundation grant review for the Sisters Neighborhood Literacy Project. I don't reward theatrics." My blood went cold. Very few people in that room knew that for the last 2 years, in addition to my day job, I had been trying to launch a small literacy center in our neighborhood for kids who were growing up the way Jake and I had. I had applied for 3 grants. One of them, apparently, had passed across one of Mark's invisible desks. He knew. Somehow, he knew. Jake lunged before I could stop him, but 2 groomsmen caught his arms. "You don't get to touch him," one hissed, not because he cared about Mark, but because rich weddings train people to protect the host before the truth. "Let go of me," Jake said through clenched teeth. Emily stepped directly in front of her father. "Hang up." Mark looked at her as if she were a child interrupting a business call. "Move." She didn't. "Hang up or I walk out of this wedding and I never come back." The room went electric. Patricia turned white. "Emily, don't say things you can't take back." Emily didn't even glance at her mother. Her eyes stayed locked on Mark's. "Try me." For the first time, I saw uncertainty break across his face. Not remorse, not yet, but fear of loss. Real loss. The kind he couldn't buy back with another donation or another country club dinner. He slowly lowered the phone, but the damage had already been done. Jake tore free of the groomsmen and stood breathing hard, one step from either triumph or disaster. "You just proved exactly why she never belonged in this family," Mark said, meaning me. "No," Emily answered. "You just proved why maybe I don't." That sentence landed harder than anything Jake or I had said all evening. It came from the one person Mark had always assumed was an extension of himself, and because it came from her, it exposed the rot in ways public accusation never could. He looked at his daughter as though he barely recognized her. "You are choosing badly." Emily's chin lifted. "No, I'm choosing clearly." Patricia crossed the floor, lowering her voice into the sharp whisper of women who care more about reputation than damage. "Think about the guests. Think about the press photographer. Think about the donors here. Stop this now." Emily turned to the room, and whatever fear remained in her seemed to burn off all at once. "Since everyone is already watching," she said, "then let them watch the truth. My father humiliated the woman who raised the man I love. He tried to control our marriage before it began. And if any of you still think that's class, then maybe all this money has made you morally illiterate." A few guests actually looked ashamed. A few looked offended. A few were already pretending to check their phones, no doubt preparing the polished version of the scandal they would retell later. But the power in the room had changed. Mark felt it. So he did what men like him do when they can't win the room. He withdrew to plan the next attack. "Enjoy your little moral victory," he said coldly. "By tomorrow morning, you'll understand that speeches don't protect you from consequences." Then he walked out. Not in a burst of rage, in controlled fury, the most dangerous kind. Jake looked as though he wanted to go after him, but Emily caught his arm. "No. Let him go." Her voice trembled now that the adrenaline had cracked. "He'll be worse if he thinks he still has an audience." I looked at the abandoned doorway Mark had disappeared through and felt something colder than fear settle inside me. This was no longer about surviving humiliation. This was war begun by a man who thought money should be able to punish love itself. And I knew in my bones that by morning, he would try to prove it. The wedding did continue, if you can call it that. People still cut the cake. The band still played. Guests still drank champagne and moved through rehearsed joy like actors who had forgotten the script no longer matched the room. But the performance was broken. Every smile after that looked borrowed. Every toast sounded false. Jake and Emily exchanged vows in a voice-shaken ceremony with only a handful of people truly present in spirit. And I stood near the back. Not because I was hiding, but because I wanted them to have one moment that belonged to them, and not to the ugliness Mark had dragged into it. The next morning, at 6:12 a.m., my phone rang. Jake's name flashed across the screen. I answered before the second ring. "He did it," Jake said without preamble. His voice sounded like he hadn't slept. "The job offer is gone." I sat up in bed. "What?" "Hensley sent a polite email at dawn. They've decided to move in another direction." Emily checked with a friend. Her father spoke to one of their investors last night. I closed my eyes. Of course he had. "And the grant?" I asked. There was a pause. "I'm sorry," Jake said. "That too." I didn't speak for a moment. Not because I was surprised. Because there is a special kind of cruelty in attacking the future a person is trying to build for other people. The Literacy Center had never been about me. It had been about children who deserved books before the world taught them shame. "Hannah," Jake said, "say something." I let out a slow breath. "I'm thinking." Emily came on the line then. Her voice was raw. This is my fault. No, I said immediately. This is his choice. He cut off the trust fund this morning, she whispered. He froze the apartment transfer. He told my mother I can come home alone or not at all. That hurt me more than I expected. Not because I pitied wealth lost, but because I heard the child in her voice, the daughter who had just discovered love could cost her the illusion of home. Where are you? I asked. At Jake's place. Good. Stay there. An hour later, Emily arrived at my apartment in jeans, no makeup, hair tied back, carrying none of the polish she had worn like armor at the wedding. She looked younger, smaller, more real. Jake came with her, tense and furious, as if anger were the only thing keeping him upright. We sat in my kitchen, the same small kitchen where I had once rationed cereal and canned soup, and for the first time the distance between our worlds narrowed into something honest. Emily reached into her bag and slid her phone across the table. There's more, she said. It was a video. Grainy, clearly not meant for public eyes. Mark sat in a private dining room with 3 men in suits and 2 women I recognized from the reception. He was drinking whiskey and laughing. The sister, he said on the recording. A martyr complex in an off-the-rack dress. The boy's talented, but talent without pedigree is still a gamble. Once Emily is legally protected, he'll either learn gratitude or learn scarcity. One of the men asked, And the sister? Mark smirked. The freeloader? She's useful only as a sentimental leash. Cut that, and he'll follow where he's told. My hand went still on the table. Jake made a sound like he'd been punched. Emily looked sick. Who recorded this? I asked. My cousin Natalie, Emily said. She sent it to me after the wedding. She was horrified but scared to go public. There's another clip too. She opened the second video. This one was worse. Mark again, in the same room, leaning back in his chair, speaking with the lazy confidence of a man who has never been truly contradicted. Poor people always make sacrifice sound holy, he said. It's usually just failure with better storytelling. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Then I set the phone face down. Not because I couldn't handle hearing more, but because I suddenly understood something important. Men like Mark rely on private contempt and public polish. They win not only because they have money, but because most people never see both faces at once. Jake looked at me. Say the word, he said. I'll put this online right now. I shook my head. Not yet. He blinked. What? Emily looked equally stunned. He already destroyed your job and your project, she said. Why wait? Because if we strike now, I said, he'll call it emotional revenge from wounded people. He'll survive it. He'll spin it. He'll paint you as unstable, me as bitter, and himself as a father protecting his daughter from manipulation. Jake leaned back, frustrated. So what do we do? I met Emily's eyes. We make him lie to our faces first. She understood before Jake did. I could see it happen. A family meeting, she said slowly. Yes, I said. You ask for one, not to fight, to reconcile. We go in calm, respectful. We give him every chance to choose decency. And if he refuses, if he threatens, insults, or admits what he's done while believing the room still belongs to him, then we don't just have pain, we have proof. Jake's anger turned thoughtful. You want him to expose himself. No, I said quietly. I want the world to see what he is when there's no place card to hide behind. Emily inhaled deeply, then nodded. I can do it. He'll agree if he thinks there's a chance to get control back. I almost smiled. Exactly. Jake looked between us, a slow, dangerous calm settling over him. Then this ends properly. That afternoon, Emily texted her father. By evening, he had agreed to meet 3 days later at his house. Patricia would be there. So would Mark's attorney, apparently, because men like him never enter a room without backup once they feel threatened. Fine. Let him bring witnesses. I had a witness too now. Truth. And before they left that night, I opened a drawer, took out a small digital recorder I used for community interviews, and placed it on the table between us. Jake raised an eyebrow. You've had that all along? I told you, I said. I'm done surviving rich people's cruelty on their terms. Emily looked at the recorder, then at me, and for the first time since I met her, I think she saw me not as Jake's hardworking sister, not as the woman who'd been humiliated at her wedding, but as someone much more dangerous to people like her father. Someone patient. A family meeting was scheduled for the following Saturday at Mark Whitmore's estate, and the moment Emily sent the message, I knew he would agree, not because he wanted peace, but because men like him never refuse a room where they think they can regain control. The days leading up to it were tense in a quiet way. Jake updated his resume and acted like he wasn't furious every time another company stopped responding. Emily drifted between guilt and clarity, reading her mother's texts and setting her phone down like each message carried the weight of the life she was slowly losing. I cleaned my apartment, answered questions about the literacy project, and forced myself to think beyond anger. I didn't want revenge built on emotion. I wanted truth that excuses couldn't survive. That morning, I dressed simply in a navy blouse, black slacks, and the same low heels I had worn to job interviews for years. No jewelry except the silver ring I bought myself after Jake graduated college, the only gift I had ever given myself that felt like proof I had survived. Before we left, I placed a small voice recorder in Jake's hand. He looked at it, then at me. "You really thought this through." "I've had practice," I said. "People like Mark count on others being too emotional to document them." Emily drew in a breath. "If he apologizes, I don't want this to become bigger." "Neither do I said. "But if he doesn't, then this ends with evidence, not opinion." Mark's house was exactly what I expected. Expensive, precise, and cold. The gates opened before we pressed the intercom, which told me he had been watching for us. Inside, everything gleamed, but nothing felt warm. Mark and Patricia waited in a formal sitting room that looked designed for appearances, not honesty. Emily stayed close to Jake as we entered, but she did not hide behind him. Mark remained seated. Patricia gave us a restrained nod. "Thank you for coming." "Let's not waste time," Mark said. "If this is an ambush, I'd prefer efficiency." Jake's jaw tightened, but he stayed quiet. I sat across from Mark. "This is simple. You humiliated me publicly. You interfered with Jake's job. You blocked a literacy grant for children who have nothing to do with your pride." Emily asked for one chance to speak honestly before this becomes irreversible. Mark leaned back. "You keep using dramatic words for ordinary decisions. No one humiliated you. A joke offended you. And I acted within my rights to protect my family from instability." Emily stared at him. "Instability? That's what you call the man I married?" Mark finally looked at her. "I call him talented but vulnerable to emotional obligation. And yes, that matters when my daughter is involved." Jake laughed once. "Say what you mean. You think I come from the wrong people." Mark didn't deny it. "I think background shapes judgment," he said. "And I think your sister's influence over you is unhealthy." Even Patricia shifted at that. I met his gaze. "The only reason my brother is sitting here with a degree and a future is because I sacrificed to keep him alive and moving forward. If that embarrasses you, that says more about you than me." Mark's mouth tightened. "What embarrasses me is the performance. The way people like you make hardship sound noble, as if sacrifice alone should grant access to rooms you didn't earn." Emily went pale. "People like you?" Patricia turned sharply. "Mark." But he kept going. "Yes, people who confuse need with virtue, people who expect applause because they survived, people who drag old hunger into every new room and call it dignity." Jake stood so fast his chair scraped. "Don't talk about her like that." Emily rose too. "Dad, stop." Mark stood more slowly, his face stripped of polish now. "No. I'm done pretending this is about manners. Your marriage began with public disrespect to this family. Your husband stopped your wedding to defend a woman who has emotionally tied him to a life he should have outgrown." I stood. Outgrown? He should outgrow loyalty? Gratitude? Memory? Mark gave a cold smile. "He should outgrow being governed by it." Emily shook her head, eyes shining. "I used to think you were strong. Now I think you're terrified of any bond you can't control." That hit him hard. "Be careful," he said. No, Emily answered. You be careful. Because every sentence you say makes it harder for me to remember why I admired you. Then he snapped. If you walk out of this house siding with them, you do it without my support, without your trust, without the apartment, without access to anything I built. I will not bankroll disrespect. Patricia closed her eyes like she had heard some version of that threat before. Jake moved toward Emily, but she lifted a hand and stopped him. Her face trembled once, then steadied. Then keep it, she said. Keep the money. Keep the apartment. Keep every polished thing you own. I would rather build a real life with a man who knows how to love than inherit comfort from a father who humiliates people to feel important. The silence afterward was enormous. Patricia whispered, Emily, please. But Emily didn't look away. You didn't embarrass Hannah because she was weak, she said. You embarrassed her because her sacrifice exposes how small your kind of success can be. I reached into my bag, took out my phone, and placed it on the table. Mark frowned. What is that? The part where you learn this room is no longer private. I pressed play. His recorded voice filled the room. Once Emily is legally protected, he'll either learn gratitude or learn scarcity. Patricia stared at him in horror. Then the second clip played. Poor people always make sacrifice sound holy. It's usually just failure with better storytelling. Jake didn't move. Emily didn't cry. They simply let the truth stand there in front of him. He stepped toward me. Where did you get that? That's your concern? I asked. Not what you said? His face drained, then hardened again. You have no idea how badly this can go for all of you. I held his stare. No, Mark. You have no idea how badly it's about to go for you. We left Mark's house without saying another word, because by then the truth no longer needed help from us. In the car, Emily wiped her tears, looked at me, and said, Post it. So I did. I uploaded the place card, the recordings, and a short statement explaining exactly what happened. Mark Whitmore humiliated me at my brother's wedding, used his influence to destroy Jake's job offer, and blocked a literacy grant meant for children, then doubled down when given a private chance to apologize. By the next morning, the story was everywhere. The recordings spread fast. The place card made it worse, because no amount of PR could explain away something so cruel, so deliberate, and so public. Within days, Mark's company announced he was stepping down during an internal review. 2 major partners pulled out of pending deals. A charity board removed him. Investors distanced themselves. The man who once believed money could silence people was suddenly watching. His name became too toxic to protect, but the real price was not financial. Emily never went back. She cut ties, moved out for good, and told him clearly that he had not just insulted me. He had destroyed her respect for him as a father. Patricia left the family estate a few weeks later and moved into a separate apartment. And the literacy project Mark tried to bury only grew stronger. After the story went public, donations came in from strangers, teachers, and parents. What he tried to choke in private began to rise in public. 3 months later, Mark came to my apartment alone. No assistant, no arrogance, no polished voice, just a man who had lost his daughter, his reputation, and the illusion that money could fix either one. He stood at my door and said, I was wrong. I looked at him and realized that for the first time in his life, he understood something simple. Humiliation does not make you powerful. It only reveals what you are. I did not invite him in. I did not comfort him. I simply told him, you lost everything that mattered because you thought kindness was weakness and money was worth more than character. Live with that. Then I closed the door. And that was the real ending. Not because Mark begged, not because he suffered, but because in the end, he lost the one thing he could never buy back, the right to be respected by the people he thought he was better than. The team behind Revenge Argon is working hard to create meaningful, engaging stories that leave a lasting impact. We want to make it clear that this is a fictional story created to share helpful lessons and educational messages with our viewers. This script highlights the importance of dignity, loyalty, and standing up against cruelty. It shows that true worth is not measured by money or status, but by character, sacrifice, and compassion. The educational value of this story lies in reminding viewers to respect others, think deeply about justice, and learn from painful experiences in a positive way.